The sky cracked open like shattered glass as the alien ships broke through Earth's atmosphere. People screamed, alarms blared, and the city shook under the thunder of alien engines. No one had expected war to arrive so suddenly. One moment, the world was quiet. The next it was under siege. Jackson Kane, a former Earth soldier turned peacekeeper, stood at the edge of the burning outpost. He watched as plasma fire rained down on the defense towers. The once quiet colony was now a battlefield. Jackson didn't ask questions. He grabbed his pulse rifle and headed toward the chaos. Beside him, General Varnet gave the order to regroup. Their only hope was to hold the west perimeter long enough for the evacuation ships to take off. Jackson nodded and ran toward the drop zone, but he wasn't alone. A flash of orange skin caught his eye in the smoke. Then came a voice, firm, sharp, and alien. "Get down, human." The voice ordered. A plasma blast exploded where Jackson had been standing seconds before. He turned and saw her, tall, striking, and angry. An alien woman in a half-damaged combat suit, her silver hair tied back, her yellow eyes fierce. She stood like a soldier. But she was no soldier from Earth. She fired 3 clean shots, taking down 2 enemy drones. Then she glared at Jackson. "You're slow. You'd be dead if I hadn't seen you," she said. Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Nice to meet you too," he replied. She didn't laugh. Her voice softened just a bit. "I'm Commander Alira of the Valari. And you're in my way." The Valari were supposed to be neutral. No one knew why they had come to Earth. Were they allies or a second threat? Jackson didn't have time to ask. They were being pushed back. "You fight well for someone who insults strangers," he muttered. She just smirked and pulled him behind cover. The war wasn't going to end today. But strange alliances were being formed in the fire. Jackson found himself moving in sync with the alien commander. They covered each other, called shots, saved each other more than once. She cursed in her native tongue when his weapon jammed. He shielded her when her arm was hit. When the battle died down and the last enemy drone crashed into the dirt, Jackson fell to one knee, breathing hard. Alira stood over him, clutching her bleeding side. "You owe me a drink," she muttered. He laughed. "And you owe me a thank you for saving your life twice," he said. She rolled her eyes. They were alone now behind enemy lines. The rest of their units had either fallen or retreated. Their only option was to head north through hostile territory. Jackson looked at her and asked, "Why help me?" "Your kind doesn't usually step in for humans." She hesitated. "Because we made a mistake," she said finally. "And I'm here to fix it." Jackson didn't trust her. Not yet, but something about the way she stood wounded, proud, and unafraid told him this wasn't just about politics. She had something to prove. And he wasn't going to survive this without her. She turned away and began walking. "Come on, soldier. I won't wait for you," she called over her shoulder. Jackson followed. Somewhere between the smoke and fire, 2 enemies had become uneasy allies. The war had begun, but so had something else, something neither of them expected. The forest north of the battlefield was thick, damp, and full of hidden sounds. Every branch snap made Jackson's hand jump to his weapon. Alira walked ahead of him with steady steps, her wounded side bandaged but still leaking dark blue blood. She didn't complain. She never complained. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the outpost ruins. Jackson didn't know if he could trust her yet. She saved his life, but she was still an alien. She had her reasons, and none of them had been shared. "Stop," Alira said sharply. Jackson froze. She raised her hand, scanning the tree line with narrow eyes. Then, silently, she crouched low and pointed to a half-buried sensor mine. Jackson followed her lead and disarmed it without a word. "You've trained with mines?" she asked, surprised. "A little," Jackson said. "You're not the only one with a war history." Her lip twitched at that. Maybe it was almost a smile. They continued forward, slower now. The map she carried wasn't synced to Earth systems, so she guided them using landmarks only she seemed to recognize. Jackson grew more curious the farther they went. She didn't behave like an invader. She moved like someone who knew this ground too well. "Why are you really here?" he finally asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Because your people were targeted by mistake, and my orders were to stop it before it becomes worse." He didn't understand. "A mistake?" Alira nodded. "An AI defense system in our fleet marked this region as hostile after an ancient beacon activated. We didn't mean to start a war with Earth, but now others think it's too late to pull back." Jackson stared at her. "So you came here to clean up someone else's mess?" She turned to him with narrowed eyes. "I came here to stop my people from becoming monsters." That silenced him. He didn't expect that answer. She wasn't just a soldier. She was risking her life to do something her command didn't support. That took guts. And it made him uneasy too. They reached a river where the bridge had collapsed. Alira jumped across with some effort, landing on the far side with a grunt. Jackson took a running start and barely made it. She caught his arm and pulled him the rest of the way. He didn't thank her. She didn't expect him to. By nightfall, they found shelter inside a rusted service bunker. The place smelled like mold and oil, but it was dry. Alira lit a small energy lamp and dropped to the floor. Her face looked pale under the light. She peeled back the bandage. The wound was worse than she'd shown. Jackson knelt beside her. "You should have told me it was infected." She didn't meet his eyes. "We don't share weakness with outsiders," he frowned. "Well, I'm not your enemy anymore. Let me help." She hesitated, then nodded once. Jackson cleaned the wound carefully, working in silence. Her skin was warm and glowing. He kept his eyes on the injury, but he couldn't ignore the way she bit her lip to stay silent through the pain. "I don't understand you," he said. "You act tough, but you're bleeding for us." She didn't answer for a long moment. Then, very softly she said, "Because I've seen what war does. I lost someone. I won't let that happen here." There was something behind her words. Not just duty, something personal. Jackson didn't push. Instead, he handed her a cloth and said, "Rest, I'll take first watch." She didn't argue. She curled up with one hand on her weapon, eyes half closed. As he watched over the bunker door, Jackson realized he didn't feel like a soldier anymore. He felt like a guardian, not just of his world, but of the strange, stubborn, beautiful warrior sleeping behind him. And that scared him more than the enemy outside. The morning brought silence, but it was not peace. Jackson woke to the sound of Alira checking her weapon, her movements fast and precise. She had already replaced her bandage, her arm tightly wrapped and her face calm. Her golden eyes met his. "We move now," she said. Jackson nodded. "No time for breakfast. No time for rest." The bunker had kept them hidden, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. They crossed rocky ground under low clouds, sticking to shadowed paths and quiet ridges. Alira paused now and then, her ears twitching at distant sounds. Jackson noticed. She flinched when she stepped too hard with her injured leg, but she never said a word. At a ridge above the valley, Alira raised her hand. "Look," she whispered. Down below, a squad of Earth soldiers had formed a perimeter around a crashed drone ship. Smoke drifted from its side. Alira's jaw tightened. "That's not our unit." Jackson scanned the group. "Those are Blackstone mercenaries," he said. "Hired by the Interplanetary Defense Corps. They shoot first, ask later." Alira's voice turned cold. "They are not here for peace. They want salvage. And anyone with intel gets shot or captured." In the center of the mercenary circle, a prisoner knelt. It was a young Valari scout, no older than 20 in human years. She looked terrified, her hands bound, her uniform torn. Jackson saw Alira's face tighten with fury. "She's one of yours," he said. Alira nodded. "And they're going to interrogate her. Possibly worse." Jackson crouched beside her. "Then we get her out." Alira looked at him with a strange expression. "You would risk that for a stranger?" He didn't blink. "She's not my enemy. The rescue plan was dangerous." Alira would draw fire, using her speed and strength to split the mercenaries' line. Jackson would circle behind, cut the prisoner loose, and lead her north through the rocks. It had to be fast. No mistakes. They took their positions. Alira moved first, leaping from the ridge and firing 2 rapid shots. The guards scattered in confusion. Jackson didn't wait. He darted down the slope, slipped through the smoke, and reached the captive. Her eyes widened with shock. "I'm here to help," he said. She nodded weakly. He cut her restraints and pulled her up. Gunfire sparked around them as Alira kept the pressure on. She fought like lightning, dodging blasts and striking with precision. They ran behind cover, Alira meeting them seconds later. Her side bled again, and her breathing was rough. But she kept moving. "Up the ridge. Go." Jackson supported the young scout and led her toward the rocks. A sniper bolt struck the ground near their feet. Another grazed Jackson's arm. He clenched his teeth but didn't stop. Behind him, Alira turned and unleashed a barrage of cover fire. When they finally made it over the ridge, they dropped behind stone walls and gasped for breath. The scout clung to Alira's arm. "Commander, I didn't tell them anything." "I swear." Alira rested a hand on her shoulder. "You held strong. That's all that matters." Jackson tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped his bleeding arm. "You're a magnet." "For trouble," he said. Alira's lips curved faintly. The scout looked between them. "You trust him?" Alira glanced at Jackson, then nodded. "More than some of my own." Jackson didn't know how to respond to that. But he didn't look away. They moved again before another patrol could track them. This time Alira let Jackson lead. She was growing weaker, her steps slower. He didn't point it out. She would never accept pity. Instead, he walked close and made sure she didn't stumble. As dusk approached, they reached a hidden valley marked on Alira's map. Inside was an old Velari relay station. The scout helped open the hatch, and the 3 of them slipped into the shadows beneath the mountain rock. Inside, the air was cool and stale. The lights flickered to life. Old tech lined the walls. Alira collapsed onto a bench, her hand over her wound. Jackson caught her before she slid to the floor. "You need rest." "Now." She looked up at him, her voice low. "You looked when I changed the bandage, didn't you?" Jackson blinked. "What? No." She gave a soft laugh, the first real one he had heard. "Liar," she whispered, blushing slightly. "No peeking, human." The relay station hummed quietly, buried deep beneath the rock. Dust coated the old Velari panels, but the core system still pulsed with a dim blue light. Jackson looked around, trying to make sense of the alien tech. Most of it was unfamiliar, but some pieces were clearly meant for communication. Alira sat, slumped near the console, her eyes half open. The young scout, Kale, worked fast to repair the power module. Her fingers moved quickly, and her face showed urgency. "If I can get this operational, we can send a signal to the Velari fleet," she said. "But they may not answer." Jackson knelt beside Alira. "You need proper medical help," he said. She shook her head slowly. "We're too far. And even if we weren't, I wouldn't make it through enemy lines again." He touched her wrist. Gently. Her skin was cooler than before. "You didn't tell me your wound was spreading," he said. She looked away. "I didn't come here to survive. I came to finish something." Jackson frowned. "What does that mean?" Alira stayed silent. Her lips pressed into a firm line. Kale glanced up from the console. "She won't say it, but she's not just a soldier. She's the one who activated the recall order. The one who defied the Velari Council. That's why they want her quiet. Jackson's heart tightened. You're a whistleblower. Alira gave a weak smile. Something like that, Kale continued. She discovered what really triggered the AI system to attack Earth. It wasn't a beacon or mistake. It was sabotage from within. Jackson stood up, pacing the room. Someone wanted war. Someone wanted to start it and blame Earth. Alira nodded. A faction inside the Velari High Command wants to expand. Earth was the easiest target. They just needed a reason. Anger burned in Jackson's chest, and you risked everything to stop it. Alira looked at him. Because I've seen what conquest looks like. I won't let my people become the enemy. The relay station's lights flickered stronger as Kale adjusted the core. Signal coming through, she said. But I don't know who will answer. Jackson helped Alira stand. She leaned on him, weaker than before, but still trying to act strong. Tell them everything, he said. Name the traitors. Let the truth go out to the fleet. Alira nodded. Her voice was low but steady. Recording message. Broadcast. Priority code white. Commander Alira of the Velari Peace Corps reporting. Earth is not the enemy. Internal forces within our council have manipulated data to trigger hostilities. This is not a war of defense. It is a lie. The signal shot into the sky, bouncing off hidden satellites and beacons still floating above Earth's atmosphere. Whether it reached the Velari fleet or not, they had done their part. Jackson looked to Alira. She was fading fast. Kale ran to her side. She needs stasis, she said. There's a pod in the medical bay. It's old, but it might work. Jackson carried her in his arms. She didn't argue anymore. She just rested her head against his chest. The stasis pod hissed open, dust spilling out. Jackson laid her inside. Kale adjusted the settings, rewired the coolant line, and finally pressed the activation panel. A soft white light surrounded Alira, and her breathing stabilized. She'll live if we can hold this place, Kale said. Jackson gripped the edge of the pod. And if the Velari fleet believes her. The silence that followed was thick with doubt. Jackson stepped out of the room, his hands shaking. He had fought in wars before, but never one that felt this personal. Alira was more than a comrade. She had trusted him when no one else did. She had fought beside him, bled for him, and now might die because of her truth. Kale stood beside him. They'll send someone, either to silence her or protect her. We need to be ready, Jackson nodded. We hold the station, no matter what comes. He turned to the door, weapon in hand, and stared into the tunnel beyond. The war outside had changed him, but the fire inside Alira had changed him more. She wasn't just a soldier or a whistleblower. She was something rare, brave, honest, and now she was his responsibility. The mountain shook beneath their feet as the first blast hit. Kale dropped her toolkit and ran toward the main control panel. Jackson jumped up from his position near the stasis pod, heart pounding. Dust rained from the ceiling as a second shockwave echoed through the relay station. They found us, Kale shouted. A Velari strike team is outside. They're not here to talk. Jackson grabbed his weapon and checked the charge. Then we hold them off. Alira's still in stasis. We don't let them touch her. The security monitors flickered to life. 5 armored figures moved like shadows through the narrow valley. Their suits were sleek, black, and unmarked. No insignias, no lights, no sound. Assassins, not soldiers. Sent to end a message before it could spread. They cut the signal, Kale said. The broadcast was blocked at the second relay. There. Wiping everything. Jackson clenched his jaw. Then we make them fail. We delay them long enough to send another. The station had no real defenses. Only reinforced doors and a few automated turrets. Kale rerouted power to lock every entrance. It'll buy us minutes, not more, she warned. Jackson positioned himself near the primary door. He knew this was a fight they couldn't win. The first explosion hit the outer hatch. Metal screamed as the blast pushed it inward. Sparks flew from the walls. Kale activated the remaining turrets. Red lights blinked as the old systems prepared to defend their home. Alira remained still inside the stasis pod. Her face looked calm, untouched by the chaos around her. Jackson glanced at her once before taking aim. "You stay right there," he whispered. "I'll handle the rest." The assassins breached the first door. One turret whirled and fired, taking one of them down, before a plasma blade sliced through it. The others spread out, fast and silent. Jackson fired, forcing them behind cover. He moved between metal crates, buying time, not ground. Kale called from the control station. "They're trying to override the lockdown. I can block them for 2 minutes, maybe less." Jackson fired again, dropping another enemy who tried to flank, but they kept coming. These weren't regular troops. They were trained to kill targets and vanish. A sharp pain hit Jackson's leg. He looked down and saw a thin blade lodged in his thigh. He pulled it out with a grunt and kept shooting. One assassin slipped behind him. Before it could strike, Kale hit a switch, and the emergency vent burst open, throwing the attacker back against the wall. "You saved me," Jackson shouted. Kale gave him a quick smile. "No peeking, human." The line caught him off guard, but he smirked. Even now she reminded him of Alira. More attackers closed in. Jackson ducked behind a broken terminal and tossed a flash grenade. The burst stunned the room for seconds, just enough for him to reposition. His leg burned, but he pushed forward. One of the black suits reached the stasis pod. Kale screamed. Jackson turned and fired a direct shot into its back. It collapsed beside the pod. Jackson limped over, placing himself between Alira and the last 2 enemies. "You're not touching her," he growled. One moved left, the other right. Kale shouted a warning. Jackson ducked just as a blade passed over his head. He rolled forward and fired at both. One went down. The other raised its weapon, but a shot from Kale's stolen pistol dropped it before it could fire. Silence returned. Smoke drifted in the air. Jackson collapsed to his knees, panting. Kale ran to his side. "You're bleeding. Badly." He nodded. "I've had worse." She helped him sit up against the wall. They sat beside Alira's pod, surrounded by scorch marks and broken tech. The room smelled like metal and fire. Jackson looked at the pod. "She better wake up soon," he muttered. Kale nodded. "She will. She's too stubborn to give up." Jackson reached into his pouch and pulled out the backup data crystal. "They didn't get this. Her full recording is in here." Kale's eyes lit up. "Then we still have a chance." He handed it to her. "You know what to do." Kale stood tall. "I'll get this to someone who can send it, even if I have to cross the mountains alone." Jackson smiled weakly. "You're tougher than you look," she replied without hesitation. "I had a good teacher." Kale moved quickly through the underground passages, the data crystal hidden inside her armored boot. Jackson had stayed behind to guard Alira, still unconscious in the stasis pod. Every breath Kale took was heavy with purpose. She was no longer just a scout. She was now the carrier of truth. The mountain trails were narrow and unstable. Drones buzzed above, scanning for any heat signatures. Kale hugged the shadows and moved only when the skies were clear. The data crystal had to reach the southern relay. If uploaded, it would spread across the Velari fleet like wildfire. Back in the bunker, Jackson sat alone in the silence. His wounded leg throbbed, but he kept his rifle ready. His eyes stayed on the stasis pod. Alira's face remained calm, but a slight twitch in her fingers gave him hope. She was fighting to return. Suddenly, the terminal lights flickered. A strange frequency began to override the broadcast system. Jackson limped over to the panel. The screen glitched, then showed a face he recognized. It was Commander Theros, one of the Valari Council leaders. "Human," Theros said, his voice smooth and cold. "You're sheltering a traitor. Hand her over, and I'll guarantee your survival." Jackson stared at the screen. "You sent assassins. Now you want mercy?" Theros smiled. "That was a misunderstanding. We now offer peace." Jackson didn't believe a word of it. "She's telling the truth. You're the liar." Theros' smile faded. "That data will never reach the fleet. Even if it does, no one will believe a half-dead soldier and a human deserter." Jackson leaned closer to the screen. "We'll see about that." Theros' image vanished, replaced by static. The system locked. Jackson tried to reboot it, but it was clear the signal was jammed from orbit. They were buying time to erase every trace of Alira's message. He had to warn Kale, but there was no way to reach her. Meanwhile, Kale finally reached the southern ridge. She dropped to one knee, scanning the area. The old satellite dish still stood, half buried in rock. She crawled to the control box, wired in the crystal, and started the transmission. Lights blinked. A soft hum filled the air. The upload had begun. Suddenly, a sharp sound behind her. Kale spun, drawing her weapon. A figure stepped into the light. It was a Valari officer, tall and armored, his gun already raised. "You've made a mistake, Scout," he said. "Give me the crystal and walk away." Kale shook her head. "No, the truth has to be known." The officer laughed. "You think they'll believe a child? You're nothing. Just background noise." Kale narrowed her eyes. Even background noise can carry a signal. She dove to the side as he fired. The blast scorched the rocks. Kale returned fire, striking his shoulder. He stumbled, but didn't fall. The upload reached 60%. Kale kept her eyes on the screen. Every second mattered. Back at the bunker, Jackson dragged himself toward the pod. Alira stirred slightly. Her lips moved without sound. Her body shivered inside the pod. "Come on," he whispered. "Wake up, we need you." Her eyes fluttered once, then shut again. The monitors flashed red. More energy signatures approaching. Jackson loaded his last clip. He pressed his back against the wall, guarding the entrance. If they came for her again, they would have to go through him first. At the ridge, Kale's rifle jammed. The officer charged. She grabbed the metal pipe from the ground and swung hard. It struck his helmet, knocking him back. She kicked him off the edge. He fell, disappearing into the rocks below. 95%. The signal climbed. The screen turned green. Upload complete. Kale fell to her knees, breathing hard. She had done it. The truth was out. Now it was up to the fleet to listen. She turned to leave but froze. Another officer stood behind her, weapon aimed. This one was silent. His finger rested on the trigger. Kale braced herself. A shot rang out. But it didn't come from him. The officer dropped, a hole in his chest. From the side, a rebel Valari emerged. "I received the signal," he said. "I believe her. I believe you." Kale nodded, her eyes wide. She wasn't alone anymore. Back in the bunker, Jackson heard the soft voice he had waited for. "Did I miss the fun?" He turned and saw Alira sitting up slowly inside the pod. She looked pale but alive. He grinned through his pain. "You always wake up at the last second." Alira looked around, her eyes adjusting to the light. "Where's Kale?" Jackson smiled. "Delivering your truth. And making enemies proud." The sky above Earth shimmered with strange light as the Valari fleet shifted formation. The truth had reached them. Alira's message, sent through Kale's courage and Jackson's protection, now echoed through every Valari ship. Inside the bunker, Alira stood on shaky legs. Her strength hadn't fully returned, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Jackson helped her stay steady, watching as she scanned the system logs. "They've paused their advance," she said. But they haven't turned back. They don't know what to believe yet, Jackson said. Some will follow you, some will try to bury the truth again. Alira looked at him. Then I need to speak to all of them, directly, one last time. She activated the relay interface. Her voice, still weak, carried more power than plasma fire. To the Valari fleet. I am Commander Alira, once of your Peace Corps. The data speaks for itself. You know now that Earth was never the enemy. We were lied to by those who hunger for conquest. Across orbit, thousands of Valari officers listened, some in silence. Some in anger, some in shame. Ships shifted position. Orders were questioned. Voices rose within command rooms. Kale stood. On the high cliff, a signal beacon beside her. The rebel Valari who had saved her activated a new channel. Commander Alira, he said. This is Captain Cyros. I speak for the 3rd Sector. We stand with you. More signals poured in. Sector after sector, captains began to pledge loyalty to Alira, not to the Council, not to the traitors, but to the truth she risked everything to share. Inside the bunker, Jackson stepped back as more responses lit the screen. Looks like you started a revolution. Alira smiled faintly. I only lit the match. Others are carrying the fire, but the battle was not yet won. From the dark side of Earth's orbit, a warship broke from formation. It belonged to Theros, the one who had ordered her death, the one who still wanted silence. He's coming here, Alira said. One last strike to erase everything. Jackson looked to her. Then we face him, together, she nodded. Together, the skies darkened. The warship descended through the clouds, weapons charged. Jackson and Alira exited the bunker. They stood outside, weapons ready, facing the incoming fire. Above them, the rebel fleet moved into position. Cyros's voice came through the cum. Commander, give the order. We can end him now. Alira took a long breath. Disable his engines. No death, no revenge. Let justice be decided by the people. The rebel fleet obeyed. Laser fire struck Theros' warship with precision. Engines failed. The ship lost control and crashed into the sea far from any city. No lives were lost. But his power was broken. Alira dropped to her knees as the energy of the moment overwhelmed her. Jackson caught her gently, his arm around her back. It's over, he said. You did it. She looked up at him. Her eyes shimmered, not from pain but from something deeper. We did it, he smiled. Still think I peaked? She laughed quietly. I know you did. But I let it slide, just once. They returned to the bunker. Kale arrived hours later, safe and triumphant. The Valari fleet officially ended hostilities with Earth. A new council was formed, built on truth and unity. Alira was offered a place among them, but she declined. I've seen enough command halls, she said. I want to walk freely now. Not behind a desk, but beside those who fight for peace. She chose to stay on Earth for a while, to learn more about the humans she had once misunderstood. Jackson remained by her side, not as a guard or soldier, but as a friend who had earned her trust. Kale returned to her people a hero. Her name was written into Valari history for the message she carried. She never forgot the night she almost died for it, and never forgot those who helped her survive. Jackson and Alira often walked the edge of the valley where the relay tower once stood. The stars above them burned brighter than ever. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, she turned to him with a soft smile. No peeking, human, she said as she removed her gloves, letting the wind touch her skin. This time there was no fear, no shame, just warmth. Jackson looked at her and replied, I'm not peeking. I'm watching someone finally be free.